Hello friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Gone Girl in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel friends in today's video. The movie we are going to talk about is called Gone Girl. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I am going to tell you, also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film, storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So, let's start the video. Gone Girl is a 2014 American psychological thriller film directed by David Fincher and written by Gillian Flynn, based on her 2012 novel of the same name. It stars Ben Affleck, Rosamund Pike, Neil Patrick Harris, Tyler Perry, and Carrie Coon in her film debut. In the film, Nick Dunn, Affleck, becomes the prime suspect in the sudden disappearance of his wife Amy Pike in Missouri. Gone Girl premiered as the opening film at the 52nd New York Film Festival on September 26, 2014, and was theatrically released in the United States on October 3, 2014 by 20th Century Fox. The film received positive reviews from critics and grossed $370 million worldwide. It became Fincher's highest-grossing film and is considered a cult postmodern mystery. Gone Girl earned Pike numerous nominations, including the Academy Award for Best Actress, the BAFTA Award for Best Actress in a Leading Role, the Critics' Choice Movie Award for Best Actress, the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress in a Motion Picture, Drama, and the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Female Actor in a Leading Role. Plot: on their 5th wedding anniversary, writing teacher Nick Dunn returns home to find his wife Amy missing. Amy's fame as the inspiration for her parents' successful Amazing Amy children's books ensures widespread press coverage. The media finds Nick's apathy towards the disappearance suspicious. Flashbacks in the form of diary entries show a complex reality and a deteriorating marriage. Amazing Amy was an idealized completion of the real Amy's failures. Both Nick and Amy lost their jobs in the recession and moved from New York to Nick's hometown of North Carthage, Missouri, to support his dying mother. Nick grew distant from Amy and began an affair with Andy, one of his students, while Amy became resentful towards Nick for uprooting her. Detective Rhonda Boney and the forensic team find poorly concealed evidence of a struggle and profuse blood loss in the house. Boney learns of financial issues, spousal disputes, and Amy's recent attempt to buy a gun. Medical reports indicate Amy was pregnant, which Nick denies knowledge of. On every wedding anniversary, Amy had set up elaborate treasure hunts for Nick. This year's clues appear in places where Nick had sex with Andy, thus revealing Amy's knowledge of his affair. Nick discovers thousands of dollars of items purchased with his credit card hidden in his twin sister Margot's woodshed. Amy's clues lead authorities to a half-burned diary documenting her growing dread of Nick and ending with a genuine fear that he will kill her. It's revealed that Amy is alive and hiding in a campground in the Ozarks. After discovering Nick's affair, Amy conceived an elaborate plan to frame him for her murder. She had him ramp up her life insurance and secretly used his credit card to buy the woodshed items. She befriended a pregnant neighbor, told her stories about Nick's temper, and stole her urine to fake a pregnancy, thus eliciting media sympathy after her disappearance. She wrote a diary with increasingly fabricated entries and placed incriminating evidence in the treasure hunt spots for the police to find. On the morning of her disappearance, Amy drained and splattered her own blood across the kitchen and then cleaned it haphazardly. Her original plan was to drown herself after Nick's arrest and have her body found to ensure his death sentence. Nick deduces Amy's scheme, convinces Margot of his innocence, and hires lawyer Tanner Bolt, known for representing uxoricide suspects. Nick meets 2 of Amy's ex-boyfriends. Tommy O'Hara claims he was framed for rape by her after he ended their relationship. Wealthy Desi Collins, against whom Amy had filed a restraining order for stalking, turns Nick away. When Amy's campground neighbors rob her, she calls Desi for help, convincing him that she fled Nick's abuse. Desi agrees to hide her in his lake house. Bolt convinces Nick to reveal his affair on a popular talk show, thus seizing the narrative initiative from the media. Andy reveals the affair at a press conference shortly before the show, but Nick insists on conducting the interview. He affirms his innocence and feigns regret for his shortcomings as a spouse, knowing that Amy will be watching. The interview is a success, garnering widespread sympathy for Nick. However, Boney has already gathered enough murder evidence and arrests Nick and Margot. Bolt bails them out, and they brace for the impending trial. After watching Nick's interview, Amy rekindles her attraction to him and spends weeks crafting her escape story. Using lake house surveillance cameras and self-inflicted wrist and vaginal injuries, she makes it appear that Desi kidnapped and raped her. She then seduces Desi, slits his throat during sex, and returns home covered in his blood, thus clearing Nick of suspicion. Medical examiners lend credence to Amy's story. During questioning, Boney probes her inconsistencies, but Amy spins the focus onto Boney by calling her incompetent. The FBI believes Amy and closes the case, but Boney gleans Amy's guilt. Upon returning home, Amy tells Nick the truth, admitting to Desi's murder. She states that Nick pleading for her return on TV is the one she wants and the one who inspired her forgiveness. Nick shares this with Boney, Bolt, and Margot. Despite unanimously agreeing that Amy is guilty, everyone acknowledges a lack of evidence. Bolt wishes Nick well and returns to New York. A televised interview takes place in their home 7 weeks later. Anticipating Nick's intention to leave her and publicly expose her story, Amy reveals her pregnancy minutes before the interview, having inseminated herself with Nick's sperm from a fertility clinic. Nick reacts violently at first, but feels responsible for the child and ultimately decides to stay with Amy, despite Margot's despair. The happy couple announces on television that they are expecting a child. Cast: Ben Affleck as Nick Dunn, a professor. Rosamund Pike as Amy Elliott Dunn, Nick's missing wife. Neil Patrick Harris as Desi Collins, Amy's wealthy ex-boyfriend. Tyler Perry as Tanner Bolt, Nick's attorney. Carrie Coon as Margot Go Dunn, Nick's twin sister. Kim Dickens as Detective Rhonda Boney, the lead investigator on Amy's disappearance. Patrick Fugit as Officer James Gilpin, Boney's partner. Missy Pyle as Ellen Abbott, a cable TV host based on Nancy Grace. Emily Redschkowski as Andy Fitzgerald, Nick's mistress and student. Casey Wilson as Noelle Hawthorne, Nick and Amy's pregnant neighbor. Lola Kirka as Greta, a young woman Amy meets at the Ozarks campground. Boyd Holbrook as Jeff, a flirtatious man Amy meets at the Ozarks campground. Lisa Baines as Mary Beth Elliott, Amy's mother. Sella Ward as Sharon Schieber, a network TV host. Scoot McNairy as Tommy O'Hara, another former boyfriend of Amy's. Scott Takita as TV producer. David Clennon as Rand Elliott, Amy's father. Kathleen Rose Perkins as Shauna Kelly Music. On January 21, 2014, Trent Reznor announced that he and Atticus Ross would provide the score marking their third collaboration with Fincher, following The Social Network and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Fincher was inspired by music he heard while at an appointment with a chiropractor and tasked Reznor with creating the musical equivalent of an insincere facade. Reznor explained Fincher's request in an interview. David was at the chiropractor and heard this music that was inauthentically trying to make him feel okay, and that became a perfect metaphor for this film. The challenge was simply, what is the musical equivalent of the same sort of facade of comfort and a feeling of insincerity that music represented? My primary aim was to instill doubt and remind you that things aren't always what they seem to be. The overall score is a combination of soothing sounds with staccato electronic noises, resulting in an unnerving, anxiety-provoking quality. NPR writer Andy Beta concludes, Reznor and Ross relish being at their most beauteous, knowing that it'll make the brutal moments of Gone Girl all the more harrowing. Richard Butler of the Psychedelic Furs sang a cover version of the song She, which was used in the film's teaser trailer. The soundtrack album was released on the Columbia label on September 30, 2014. Release Gone Girl opened the 52nd New York Film Festival, receiving high-profile press coverage and early positive reviews. It saw a nationwide release in North America in 3,014 theaters on October 3, 2014. Coinciding with the North American release, Gone Girl released at 5,270 screens in 39 international markets like the United Kingdom and Germany on its opening weekend. Home Media. Gone Girl was released on DVD and Blu-ray on January 13, 2015. The Blu-ray release comes with a 36-page Amazing Amy book called Tattletale and Audio Commentary. With Fincher is the sole special feature included on the DVD Blu-ray. Reception. Box office. Gone Girl grossed $167.8 million in the United States and Canada and $203.1 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $370.9 million against a production budget of $61 million calculating in all expenses. Deadline Hollywood estimated that the film made a profit of $129.99 million, making it one of the most profitable films of 2014. The film was released on October 3, 2014, in North America in 3,014 theaters and earned $13.1 million on its opening day, including the $1.3 million it earned from Thursday late-night showings. It finished in first place at the North American box office, earning $37.5 million after a neck-and-neck competition with Warner Brothers' New Line Cinema's horror film Annabelle, which earned $37.1 million. The film was the biggest debut of Fincher's career, breaking Panic Room's opening. It was the third biggest opening weekend for Affleck, behind Pearl Harbor, $59.1 million, and Daredevil, $40.3 million, and Rosamund Pike's second biggest opening, behind Die Another Day, $47 million. The film is the 10th biggest October debut overall. The film played 60% female and 75% over 25 years old. The film topped the box office for 2 consecutive weekends, despite facing competition with Dracula Untold in its second weekend before being overtaken by Fury in its third weekend. Outside North America, it earned $24.6 million from 5,270 screens in 39 international markets on its opening weekend, higher than expected. High openings were witnessed in the United Kingdom, $6.7 million, Australia, $4.6 million, France, $365 million, Russia, $3.4 million, and Germany, $2.6 million. Gone Girl is art and entertainment, a thriller and an issue, and an eerily assured audience picture. It is also a film that shifts emphasis and perspective so many times that you may feel as though you're watching 5 short movies strung together, each morphing into the next. At first, Gone Girl seems to tell the story of a man who might or might not have killed somebody, and is so closed off and alienating, like Bruno Richard Hauptmann perhaps, that even people who believe in his innocence can't help wondering. His name is Nick Dunn, Ben Affleck. He's a college professor and a blocked writer. His dissatisfied wife Amy, Rosamund Pike, disappears one day, prompting local cops to open a missing persons case that becomes a murder investigation after 3 days pass without word from her. Amy and Nick seemed like a happy couple. The snippets from Amy's diary, read in voiceover by Amy and accompanied by flashbacks, hint at differences between them, but not the sort that seem irreconcilable. Not at first, anyway. Were things ever really all that sunny, though? If they weren't, which spouse was the main source of rancor? Can we trust what Nick tells the homicide detectives, Kim Dickens and Patrick Fugit, both outstanding, who investigate Amy's case? Can we trust what Amy tells us via her diary? Is one of the spouses lying? Are they both lying? If so, to what end? The film raises these questions and others, and it answers nearly all of them, often in boldface, all-caps sentences that end with exclamation points. It is not a subtle film, nor is it trying to be, as directed by David Fincher, see 7 in Zodiac, and as adapted by Gillian Flynn from her best-selling Potboiler, Gone Girl suggests one of those overheated, fairly comic bookish R-rated thrillers that were everywhere in the late 80s and early 90s. Like those sorts of pictures, Gone Girl is dependent upon reversals of expectation and point of view. As soon as you get a handle on what it is, it becomes something else, then something else again. Describing its storyline in detail would ruin aspects that would be counted as selling points for anyone who hasn't read Flynn's book. That's why I'm being so vague. Suffice to say that it's explicit sex and violence, and one damn thing after another, to hell with realism plotting, put it in the Basic Instinct, Fatal Attraction, presumed innocent wheelhouse. It is a metafictionally minded version of a bloody domestic melodrama that actually uses the word meta, in a scene where Nick and the cops discuss his bar, which is named The Bar. It ties much of its mystery plot to an anniversary scavenger hunt, with clues enclosed in numbered envelopes marked Clue. Key scenes revolve around public statements that are in some sense performances, and that are evaluated by onlookers in terms of their believability. And yet, it never crosses the line and becomes too much a deconstruction or parody. It's a plot-obsessed picture that's determined to stay one step ahead of the audience at all times, and cheats when it feels it has to. It is a perfect example of a subgenre that the great critic Ann Bilson has labeled the preposterous thriller, in which characters and their behavior bear no relation not just to life as we know it, but to any sort of properly structured fiction we may have hitherto encountered. Many classic and near-classic films can be slotted into this subgenre. One of them is Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, a film in which the bad guy's scheme makes no sense if you think about it for longer than 30 seconds, and that, in any event, would have unraveled had even the smallest part of it not gone precisely as envisioned. How did Gavin and imposter Maddie get out of the bell tower anyway, without being seen by anybody, including Scotty? Was there a second stairwell? After Gone Girl, I overheard a couple listing all the dropped plot threads and narrative holes big enough to hide aircraft carriers in. This isn't the sort of movie that can withstand that kind of scrutiny. You might as well say, that part in my dream where the penguin told me where to dig for the treasure seemed unrealistic. What of Gone Girl as a parable of gender relations, one that eventually takes an ugly misogynist turn? I've heard these charges leveled, and they have merit. You'll understand what I mean once you've seen the movie. At the same time, though, as we evaluate those complaints, we owe it to Flynn, Fincher, and everyone involved to take into account what sort of film this is, what mode it's operating in, and how transparent it is about what it's doing, how it's doing it, and why. Gone Girl is a nightmare of love gone cold, and a relationship gone south, coupled with an elaborate revenge fantasy that both exploits and reclaims sexist images and assumptions. It's also a film about a psychopath who turns an ordinary life into chaos. Like a lot of Hitchcock, and like certain domestic nightmares by such filmmakers as Brian De Palma and Luis Buñuel, each scene in the movie refers, however obliquely, to real fears, real emotions, and real configurations of love or friendship. But at the same time, not a single frame is meant to be taken literally, as a documentary-like account of how people are, or should be, or shouldn't be. It's working through primordial feelings in the manner of a blues song, a pulp thriller, a film noir, or a horror picture. These modes all trade in stereotypical views of the essences of masculinity and femininity. All are politically incorrect by definition. All seem to have had at least some bearing on Gone Girl. The movie is sick joke, a fable, and a lament. It's he done her wrong and she done him wrong. It's men are spineless pigs, and hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. If you make blanket assumptions about what men and women are capable of, and the circumstances under which they're capable of it, this film will confirm them. Your chin, Amy tells Nick in a flashback. It's quite villainous. He covers it up with his finger, but now that she's pointed it out, you can't not stare at it. The most intriguing thing about Gone Girl is how droll it is. For long stretches, Fincher's gliding widescreen camera work, immaculate compositions, and sickly, desaturated colors fuse with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's creepy, optimistic synthesized score to create a perverse big-screen version of one of those TV comedies built around a pathetically unobservant lump of a husband and his hyper-controlling, slightly shrewish wife. For most of its running time, Gone Girl is everybody loves accused wife murderer Raymond, sprinkled with colorful, verging on wacky supporting players, including Tyler Perry as a Johnny Cochran-like defense attorney and Neil Patrick Harris as a former flame of Amy's who's still obsessed with her. Then, it takes a right turn and a left turn and flips upside down. I'm not saying the film is genuinely clever throughout, though it is always fiendishly manipulative, or that every twist is defensible, a few are stupid. I'm saying that Gone Girl is what it is, that it knows what it is, and that it works. You know how well it's working when you hear how audiences laugh at it, and with it. Their laughter evolves as the film does. They laugh tentatively at first, then with an enthusiasm that gives way to a full-throated, I endorse this madness, gusto during the final half hour, when the story spirals into De Palma-style expressionism and the picture becomes a maelstrom of blood, tears, and other bodily fluids. There are allusions to the O.J. Simpson case, Macbeth, and Medea, and the ending is less an ending than a punchline that's all the more amusing for feeling so deflated. Gone Girl follows the intriguing story of Amy Dunn's, Rosamund Pike, disappearance, and the movie's ending not only reveals a clever twist, but also shares the manipulative nature of her marriage to Nick, Ben Affleck. At first, the story appears to follow the formula of a typical domestic thriller, with a husband viewed as the prime suspect in his wife's murder. When the movie takes a brilliant turn and reveals that Amy is alive and attempting to frame Nick, It becomes a flawless example of how to tell this type of tale without resorting to cliched storytelling or predictable twists. With David Fincher's sharp direction and a brilliant script from the novel's author Gillian Flynn, Gone Girl is a masterclass in depicting a tense, toxic marriage. The book's structure explains the twist through Amy's journal entries, and the movie captures the same harsh tone. Gone Girl's ending answers several crucial questions, from what happens to the central couple to why Amy purposefully goes missing. While some twist endings are silly and lackluster, the reveal that Amy has planned this all along will always have the same lasting impact, and the layers of her character are explored in every scene. While every thriller should offer a fascinating and surprising ending, Gone Girl is known for mastering the unpredictable twist. As the story progresses, Amy's perfect plan is revealed to be not so flawless after all. She never accounted for the powerful and dangerous Desi Collings, Neil Patrick Harris, whom she once dated and who attempts to keep her in his home. This is the only time she appears afraid. She decides to escape and return to her life with Nick by killing Desi and making it look like he kidnapped and assaulted her. This is crucial to understanding Amy's character arc, as she will do whatever is necessary to get what she desires. At the end of the Gone Girl timeline, Amy makes her way back to Nick, seeming to bring this story to a shocking yet happy conclusion in the eyes of the public. Nick thinks he has the upper hand, but Amy convinces Nick to allow her to come home by sharing her pregnancy news and appealing to the soft, sensitive side still buried inside of him. When Amy says, "Nick got lazy. He became someone I did not agree to marry. He actually expected me to love him unconditionally," she explains her motive for pretending to disappear, paying Nick back for his infidelity and for no longer treating her in the same loving and appreciative manner that he did when they first began dating. Ben Affleck's Gone Girl character is never sympathetic, and his infidelity and poor behavior are exposed, which proves that both characters are complicit in the failure of their marriage. Amy's real pregnancy at the conclusion of the story reveals that she has had a main plan all along, to force her husband to remain married to her because he wants to raise their baby. This is a compelling callback to the beginning of the movie when Amy pretends to be expecting in order to garner empathy and to make her husband look worse. She tests out her theory that a baby cannot be ignored. This plot point is effective, as Amy proves her intelligence and understanding of her husband. If she didn't become pregnant, it's possible that he would walk away. Gone Girl is a memorable psychological thriller because the story traces Amy's intense thought process and shares her untrustworthy nature. She traps Nick the way that she believes he has trapped her, in a house in a dull Missouri town that doesn't measure up to their life in New York City. She channels her resentment for her lackluster domestic life and forces Nick to pay attention to her again. If Amy is devastated at Nick no longer viewing her as worthy of adoration and interest, Nick is equally stunned by how different his life looks in Missouri, as he runs a bar and teaches journalism. Nick's close relationship with his sister, Margot Dunn, Carrie Coon, serves two smart purposes. Margot, who goes by the nickname Go, disapproves of Amy and Nick reuniting and becoming parents. She is the only character in Gone Girl who is honest, telling her brother that he was wrong to cheat on his wife and is uncertain of Amy's motives throughout the story. Go is also the only character besides Nick who realizes Amy is a liar. Nick ignores his sister's opinion, proving he can be just as cold and unfeeling as his wife. Go realizes the truth. The couple brings out each other's terrible qualities, but they are incapable of ending their marriage. They take a strange pleasure in making each other miserable. While Gone Girl's shocking twist ending leaves viewers speechless, Nick is not innocent, and it's possible that he will get his own revenge on his wife in the future. It is suggested that Go will be there for her brother, but will always watch Amy. The Gone Girl ending is the same as the book, with the couple back together again and faking a content and peaceful marriage. The movie makes a few subtle alterations from the novel, most notably Nick telling Amy, "I feel sorry for you because every morning you have to wake up and be you." It's the perfect finish, sharing that while she has convinced him to stay in their marriage and raise their child, he has the upper hand as well. However, the same sentiment is still present in the film adaptation, with the final scene of the couple sharing the news of their baby, as they are attempting to keep up appearances. As long as they look happy to others, they can pretend that everything is fine. Gone Girl not only has one of the greatest movie plot twists of all time, But its ending also explores the horrible choices that people make and how easy it can be for someone to convince themselves that what they are doing is right. Amy and Nick may not believe they have anything in common anymore, but they reveal themselves to be the same person, ruthless, calculated, and self-centered. They do what is necessary in order to survive, no matter who it hurts, and they don't look back. While Nick can ignore his sister's discomfort at his life choices, Amy needs the love and approval of strangers to move forward. The Gone Girl ending also suggests that Nick will never be safe as long as he continues to live with and stay married to his wife. With Amy winning, she can continue to do so in the future, and it's possible and probable that she will manipulate him again. The next time Nick is unfaithful or makes a choice his wife dislikes, she will devise another plan. However, it's also possible that Nick will betray Amy again and that she will underestimate him. The eerie and unnerving tone of the final scene drives home the idea that neither partner is trustworthy nor in the right. The Gone Girl ending wasn't always going to be what fans saw in the movie. David Fincher previously said that author Gillian Flynn threw out her own book's ending and started from scratch. This scared a lot of the book's fans, but Flynn said that was greatly exaggerated. And Fincher himself said that the film's ending had the same intentions, but a new bone structure that Flynn added when she wrote the story as a script for the movie, via Vulture. Of course, as people who read the book and saw the movie know, the ending was the same with just subtle changes concerning what Nick and Amy said to each other at the end. Fincher said in an interview via IndieWire that he sees this movie going from a mystery to an absurdist thriller to a satire by the end. However, through it all, Fincher was proudly Team Amy. The director said there are moments where he cheers for Amy, and he loves seeing her make all these elaborate plans for revenge. As for the ending where Amy and Nick are forced to go on together, Fincher sees it as a dark comedy. Gone Girl is often considered one of the best movies in David Fincher's filmography, and the ending especially ties together everything the director and screenplay had laid out up to that point. As a result, the film received a strong critical reception, with an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes and 87% from general audiences, indicating that most people on either side of the aisle enjoyed Gone Girl immensely. Gone Girl's ending is also one of Fincher's most shocking, as Nick Dunn's realization that he will have to play Amy's game for a long, long time perfectly encapsulates their relationship that unfolded across the film's narrative. Viewers responded in kind as well to the final few twists of Gone Girl, as everything that had been building up for the movie's runtime completely boils over and leaves us all stunned as to what just happened. In fact, it's the creation of a heightened atmosphere of suspicion around those banal crimes that leads eventually to the real ones. Maybe Gone Girl is just playing around and making up rather than finding connections within our imaginative lives. The same sort of question could be asked about Fight Club. 2. Do young Mina really think that growing comfortable with violence is the only way to make sense of themselves? Surely that movie overstates things, but that doesn't mean it isn't on to something. Should Gone Girl convince you that our contemporary skepticism about marriage is rooted ultimately in our lurid, misguided communal fantasy life number? That said, sometimes you need a big pair of pliers to turn a tiny bolt gone. Girl has resonated for a reason. It has found a creepy, confused, and troubling part of us and expressed it. This will be a very personal review for me, as Gone Girl is to date my favorite movie. You probably already understand where this review is going, so if that's what you wanted to know, whether I like the movie or not, you've got your answer. If, however, you're interested in the yes, but by part of this article, read on. Gone Girl based on the book with the same name and written by Gillian Flynn is clearly a well-loved piece. The book has stirred up the literary community in big waves, and now it was adapted to the big screen. By a master of his craft, David Fincher, the director of the movie, doesn't need my praise to establish him as one of the greatest minds in cinematography, as his collection of works has already spoken volumes for his reputation. He is truly an artist before a canvas, bending his worlds to show us the truth in ours. As such, the world created by him in this movie is to me one that tells several stories at once, and mainly the story of a couple and the story of a society. I will not go much into exploring the couple's story. It is the interface plot, the thing that moves and the one you hear first. And yet for me, it is secondary to the story that happens, as it were, in its background. You see, After I have finished watching Gone Girl for the first time, I had a good hour or so when I was speechless, in the truest sense of the word. I wanted to talk about the movie, but I was just too busy processing what has just been slowly creeping under the surface of it to be able to coherently draw any smart commentary. For me, Amy Dunn's character, as fascinating as it is not where the moral is hidden. I think the lesson to take from this movie is closer to that of Peter Verunk's Sons of Cain, where he declares, "We have met the enemy and he is us." I mean, sure, she has her issues and some of her actions would be viewed as over the top by the majority of the population, but isn't she a product of her environment? She was raised in a rich home by parents who never saw her as she was, always like someone who isn't who they wanted her to be, and they took it out on her by creating an alternate child that they loved more. So she learned that people believe in the image you create for them. She wasn't told she is good as she was, so she learned to lie and pretend. And then she did just that. She used this image as her tool in obtaining what she wanted. And if you see through the murder and the lying, all she wanted was to be loved and seen as she really was. What impressed me is that we decided as a society to see the villain in the murderer and not look in our garden for the culprit. Yes, we become a part of the society in this movie when we start to go with the media and take sides as we are guided through the film. Would we be in there in the first gathering offering Nick our support with the hope that he would notice our good cooking skills now that he is potentially single? Would we be the girl trying to take a selfie with the hot topic of the day to get us a slice of that publicity cake and act all defensive when he tries to take that cake back? Would we be the TV woman mouthing off on a topic we have zero evidence on and knowledge of? Oh, I think a lot of our society would go, here, how is David Fincher pointing the finger at us now in this century? We are our own private media, sharing opinions, breaking news, and biased conclusions, unfounded and often not linked to the subject matter with any tangible piece of reason. Aren't we there in the movie, too? Asking Nick if he killed his wife. If this were a real-life case, wouldn't we be sharing a petition of some sort, asking for retribution? Just look at the case with a real-life actor who was fired from a show he carried on his shoulders and then erased from a half-film movie who has had all doors closed before him, before anything was even discussed in courting any resemblance. I found the reveal to be a little too easy on the viewer when Amy Dunn stops reading diary entries and starts her monologues and the soon-to-be dead part, throwing pink pants while driving off in a car. There was no "what's in the box" moment or big reveal with shocking background music. There was just a woman, following her checklist, casually framing her husband for murder, and a viewer's perspective forced to shift. Have you felt the uneasy way you admitted that the guy didn't actually murder his wife and the news anchor who was your gospel of truth should have known better? Did you despise her for being so loud and then faking friendship to Nick in the subsequent interview? Or did you still think that he deserved what was coming for him because he cheated on Amy? Were you just as loud on blaming Amy's actions as you were on blaming? All of these questions, I am asking them as a way of showing you my own introspection through the movie. And in this train of thought, I think the genius of the film is found. Oh, sure, I'm not dismissing the directorial work itself. The music, the camera work, the lights, the angles. All of them are marvelous. But in the end, all of them are also just vehicles for the idea of the movie. You may have seen the revenge story of the villain who gets her own in the end and the guilty husband duly punished. But I've been taken on a ride into my conscience down there where I know things are not about her as much as they are about me as an individual and about us as a society. You see, I think Gone Girl is brilliant because in a way it shows us who we really are. It makes us see it inside of our thoughts and it knows that we saw it. David Fincher closes this film as if he promises us not to tell anyone and changes the subject, leaving us silently, thankful that we don't have to talk about it. After the perceived commercial disappointment of the girl. With the Dragon Tattoo 2011, despite an eventual worldwide haul of more than $230 million, Fincher's latest R-rated 2.5-hour screen version of a phenomenally successful potboiler will have an easier time translating its considerable pedigree critical plot and award season hype into must-see status. It helps that the director is working on a significantly lower budget this time around, about $50 million, from a novel that has neither steeped too long in the public consciousness nor spawned any prior movies. It also helps that Gone Girl, unlike Dragon Tattoo, registers as more than just a technically immaculate, dramatically superfluous exercise in style. 000 making an impressive screenwriting debut with adaptations of her two other novels in the works. Flynn has ruthlessly streamlined but not materially altered her story, fully retaining its bifurcated time-shuffling structure and elaborate spoiler, susceptible twists to preserve the purity of the experience. Read no further. The sheer complexity of the narrative finds an ideal interpreter in Fincher. Boasts of one of cinema's great forensic minds and who dissects of the marriage of Nick and Amy Dunn Affleck. And Pike with the same clinical precision, an eye for minutia he wielded in his serial killer procedural Seven and Zodiac together. He and Flint spin this study of a troubled relationship into an extreme portrait of matrimonial hell, as well as a stark metaphor for just how little we may know or trust our so-called better halves. Employing a quick still shot montage to capture the well-kept Alons and empty storefronts of Fan North Carthage, a sleepy Missouri. Town hit hard by the 2008 financial crisis, Gone Girl opens on the mornings of the Dunth wedding anniversary. The same morning, Amy inexplicably disappears from their home. Although Nick claims to have yet no idea what's happened to his wife, it takes him little time to rouse the suspicions of Rhonda Boney, Kim Dickens, whose thorough sweep of the premises and dog investigation of his personal life yield considerable evidence that the Dunn marriage, like their finances, has fallen on tough times. As the A case against Nick begins to miss, seemingly insufficient displays of grief make him an easy target for professional witch hunters like Helen Abbott, Missy Pyle, and Nancy Grace like Cable Harridan, who leads the charge against him. It's not long before Nick is being coached by not only his tough but loyal twin sister Margot Carey, but also a high-powered defense attorney Tanner Bolt Tyler Perry. Among other things, Gone Girl functions as a wickedly entertaining satire of our scandal-obsessed, trash TV-addicted media culture. This is a movie as conversant with the toddy true crime sagas of Scott Peterson and Casey Anthony as it is with classic thrillers of domestic entrapment, like Rebecca Bible, Rosemary's Baby, and Fatal Attraction. Through it all, the missing of Mrs. Daw remains a strong, insistent screen presence, popping up in regular flashbacks at a era earlier happier days in New York where this Brainia and a beautiful young woman led a life of luxury, sophistication, and modesta celebrity. The full arc of her relationship with Nick, a working-class Midwesterner, comes into focus after a blissful first encounter and marriage in Manhattan. The slow draining of their resources, exacerbated by their layoffs from their writing bombs and their eventual relocation to Nick's Missouri hometown, where he sinks into laziness and despair, leaving Amy trapped in now with the man who has lost all motivation to make her happy. Whispers of domestic violence, spousal neglect, and infidelity emerge, and other suspicious figures fled into the frame, including Desi Collings, Neil Patrick Harris, a dapper ex-boyfriend of Amy's, and Noel Hawthorne, Casey Wilson, her Meadow neighborhood pal. Ida soon becomes clear that the central mystery of Gone Girl will hinge not on what happened to Amy, but rather on who she and Nick really are and what brought them to this fateful point and their marriage. A question that the two leads initially, poker-faced performances, are in no hurry to answer, whether it's starting between past and present or juxtaposing Amy's cryptic diary entries with the handwritten clues she left behind as part of a 5th anniversary treasure hunt for Nick. Flynn's screenplay has an unusual ability to keep the story moving on multiple levels, commanding the viewer's attention with near act of explicit violence for most of the film's runtime. And Wagon Girl springs the first of several game-changing reversals around the halfway point at a pleasure. Stems less from shock value negligible for those who've read the book than from the sheer delight the filmmakers seem to take in pulling us deeper into their labyrinth is by now well-versed in the art of misdirection, and his control of this material is assured and absolute. This is hardly the first time he's forced us to question what we're seeing and through whose eyes we're seeing at Fight Club, or examine the media's tendency to distort and amplify paranoia, Zodiac, or juggled parallel timeframes and dueling perspectives so as to complicate our sense of the truth, The Social Network. But what makes Gone Girl so particularly potent and such an appropriate H-match for this filmmaker's icy view of the human condition AI is its deliciously cynical attitude toward the relationship at its core, its sly awareness of the thin line between love and hate, happiness and misery, and its skill at laying bare the cruel, manipulative behavioral patterns that spouses can lapse into over time, likely to elicit uncomfortable chuckles of recognition from women and men alike. The film views a marriage as a performance of sorts, a contract under which husband and wife agree to a certain measure of pretense. The need to perform privately as well as publicly becomes quite literal in Nick and Amy's case, and Gone Girl finally pushes this premise into a realm of nightmarish grand gig absurdity as it reaches a denouement that stays completely faithful to the novel's wrap-up. Early reports to the contrary were left to entertain the notion that we may never know the whole truth about the person to whom we've said I do, and indeed we're probably better off not knowing. Affleck has done some of his finest screen work playing men of power and privilege. Suddenly brought low by fate, George Reeves in Hollywoodland, a laid-off executive in The Company Men, and he's perfectly cast as Nick Dunn, bringing just the right golden boy gone to seed, dare to a character who is slowly deprived of his dignity and privacy, inch by cruel inch, often unfairly criticized. Early in his career for seeming smug, vain, and inauthentic, on-screen Affleck is uniquely suited to the role of a man facing those very charges from a fickle and demanding public. It's a tricky turn, requiring a measure of careful underplaying and emotional aloofness, and he nails it completely. Still, as its title suggests, Gone Girl belongs to its leading lady. Pike is the sort of elegantly composed blonde beauty with whom Hitchcock would have had a field day, and some may well quibble that the actress's cool British hoarder doesn't fully capture Amy's America's sweetheart side. Yet, as evidenced by her years of solid supporting work, she also possesses the sort of ferocious charisma that magnetizes the screen, and it's a thrill to watch her fully embrace of the showiest, most substantial role of her career. Hers is the low, seductive voice we hear coaxing us through the story's early passages, and hers is the character who ultimately exhibits the most dynamic range. In any given scene, her Amy can seem vulnerable, aggrieved, calculating, heroic, overmatched, viperous, and terrifying. Flynn's novel has drawn criticism in some quarters for its alleged misogyny, a highly debatable charge that is largely neutralized here by the atmosphere of gender blindness that pervades much of the director's work, and in the end, Pike's performance is too singular and vivid to be reduced to simplistic terms of degradation or empowerment. Suffice to say that Tammy Dunn earns her place alongside Marquis Zuckerberg and Lisp Salander in Fincher's gallery of pitiable yet monstrous protagonists whose refusal to beg for the audience's sympathy is exactly what makes them such undeniable objects of fascination. The outstanding leads aside, nearly every scene of Gone Girl is dotted with terrific supporting players, all of whom fit seamlessly into its broad yet highly specific snapshot of post-Retian American life, a portrait that stretches from a Manhattan literary enclave to a cabin hideaway in the Ozarks. Perry and Harris play expertly against type as the media-savvy lawyer and the creepy ex-boyfriend, respectively, while Pila Award gives sharp turns as two rather different TV personalities who play their parts in spinning the Dunn saga for the outside world. David Clennon and especially Lisa Baines are the very picture of WASP entitlement as Amy's socialite parents, while Dickens and inject a contrasting note of blue-collar dependability as two women who struggle not always easily to give Nick a fair hearing. As ever, Fincher's behind-the-scenes collaborators turn in work of an exceptionally high standard. His camera utterly well-placed in every scene. DP Jeff Cronmuth brings a drab, underlit look to the Dunn McMansion, the police station, and other North Carthage locations. Actually, Cape Guillardo Mo, suitably nondescript in Donald Graham's production design. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, whose moody electronic compositions have become synonymous with the director's work, once again devising a soundscape that all but pulses with dread, this time by lacing more traditional orchestral fare with their trademark synths. Working without his usual partner Angus Wall, with whom he won Oscars for The Social Network and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, editor Kirk Baxter cuts the picture to within an inch of its life while still allowing individual scenes and the overall structure to breathe. This is a movie you sink into even when you're on the edge of your seat. Particularly fraught violent moments are heightened by quick fade-ins and fade-outs, a hallucinatory effect that registers as palpably as a shudder. Gondila is a mystery thriller about a Midwestern man whose wife has gone missing due to a lack of a body. Nick's behavior and clues pointing to him being his wife's killer. The police, the media, and the public begin to suspect that he may have killed her. A Gongula begins on the 5th anniversary of Nick and Amy Dunn, in which Nick announces his intentions to divorce Amy to his sister Margot Go. When Nick returns to his home, he discovers that it is in disarray. He also realizes that Amy is missing, while a team under Detective Rhonda Boney investigates Amy's disappearance. And Nick, the movie reveals flashbacks of their 5-year relationship. From their first meeting, at a party in New York City, their courtship and wedding, the economic and personal woes that led them to movie 2. Nick's Missouri hometown, his affair with a local college student, and their eventual estrangement because Amy's parents had used her as their inspiration for the amazing AIA children's books. Her disappearance catches the attention of the media by the movie's midpoint. Detective Boney and the North Carthage police come to believe that Nick had murdered his wife. It is also at this point when the narrative reveals that Amy is not only alive, but had framed Nick for her murder. I might as well say it. Gangula is an emotionally crazy film that can almost put the ABC series Scandal to shame. Its first half seemed like your typical yet 12-done mystery thriller about the disappearance of a spouse. But once the narrative reveals that the missing woman, Amy Dunn, is alive, the movie transforms into this wild and crazy tale filled with lies, desperation, greed, obsession, and melodrama. The ironic thing about A Gondola is that this transformation did not harm the movie's narrative one bit. If anything, it made the movie more interesting. And I have to thank Gillian Flynn, who not only wrote the novel, but also the screenplay, and director David Fincher for keeping this insanity under control and making it believable. Another aspect about A Ganga that I found very interesting is that it provided an interesting insight into the illusions that exist in our society. The movie explored the downside of celebrity and the media's culpability into it. This exploration of celebrity even reveals how families, including Amy's parents and her own marriage to Nick, exploits it for their own gain. 9 scenes remind me of this. The revelation that Amy's parents used her life as the inspiration for their novels. Nick's performance on a talk show in order to prove his innocence, and the performance that both he and Amy give in the movie's conclusion to prove the happy state of their marriage. The visual style for Ganga seemed to possess that rich, smooth look that marked other films directed by David Fincher. I am not surprised the cinematographer for this film, Jeff Cronworth, had worked with Fincher in 3 other films. I especially enjoyed how Cron's recaptured the color and look of the Midwest, especially the movie's location shots in Cape Guyarda, Missouri, which served as North Carthage. The movie also benefited from Kirk Baxter's editing. The latter certainly had his work cut out for him in the movie's second half. I wish I could say that I found Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross' score memorable, but I would be lying. All I can say is that it served the movie very well, and there did not seem to be a flat note out of place. Trust me, I have seen movies in which the score and the narrative seem to be in a state of conflict. There are 3 things about A Gone Gorilla that made it incredibly memorable for me. I have already commented on David Fincher's direction and Gillian Flynn's narrative. What I have not commented on are the performances featured in the film. There were supporting performances that struck me as enjoyable, yet brief. Scoot McNairy gave an interesting and realistically frantic performance as Amy's ex-boyfriend who had an unpleasant breakup with her when he failed to live up to her expectations. Missy Pyle was a hoot as the Nancy Grace-style commentator that spent most of the movie, accusing Nick of murder. Lisa Baines and David Clannon gave subtle performances as Amy's ambitious and snobbish parents. Murray Beth and Rand Elliott. Patrick Fugg gave a slight performance as Detective Sardonic Assistant Officer James. Gilpin, Emily Ray Tajikowski was solid yet sexy as Nick's young mistress, and student Andy Fitzgerald. Salah Ward gave a brief yet amused portrayal of TV talk. Show hostess Sharon Schieber. Gone proved to be the first motion picture I had seen Neil Patrick Harris in years, and his role as Amy's college boyfriend Desi Collings was the first dramatic role I had seen him do. Personally, I thought he did a fantastic job in portraying the controlling Desi whose obsession with Amy struck me as rather creepy. The best thing about Harris' performance is that it proved to be subtle yet effective. Tyler Perry seemed to be having a ball as Nick's famous and successful defense attorney, Tanner Bold. The actor did a great job in conveying his character's legal smarts and common sense. Of all the characters, Perry's seemed to be the most amused, and his hilarious yet spot-on assessment of Nick, Amy, and their marriage nearly had me on the floor laughing. Aside from Perry, Kim Dickens gave the most grounded performance in the film as the North Carthage police detective Rhoda Boney, who was assigned to investigate Amy's disappearance. I rather enjoyed Dickens' no-nonsense performance and was rather relieved that her character did not automatically assume Nick's guilt while conducting the investigation. I have never seen Carrie before. Or A Gone Gorilla. I've only seen 1 episode of HBO, so The Leftovers saw and did not recall seeing her in it, and she proved to be a revelation as Nick's twin sister, Margot Gone. I thought she did an excellent job of balancing Margot's pragmatic and frank opinion of both Nick and Amy, and at the same time willingness to allow Nick to emotionally manipulate her. Superficially, Margot seemed like a cut-and-dryer role, but did such an excellent of exploring the character's emotional state. Ganga has been out in theaters for over a month and a half, and already the media has Rosamund Pike pinpointed for an Academy Award nomination for her performance as a complex and manipulative Amy Dunn. Frankly, I agree with him. I thought she did a superb job in portraying Amy's chaotic moral compass and her penchant for wallowing in illusions that extended to molding the men in her life to fit her perfect image of manhood. There were moments when Pike's performance seemed in danger of sliding into theatricality, but in the end, the actress kept her performance under control. Ben Affleck seemed to have no trouble in keeping his character Nick Dunn under control. 1. Could say that he seemed to have little difficulty in portraying Nick's complacent and occasionally lazy personality. Many have claimed that Affleck was merely playing himself. I will not make such an assumption, considering I do not know jack about Affleck's true personality. I will state that I was more than impressed by his brilliant portrayal of Nick, who proved to be underneath the lazy douchebag persona just as chaotic as Amy. And like her, he possessed a talent for manipulation and wallowing in illusions. Although Rosamund Pike is being touted by the media for an Academy Award nomination, I have not heard anything similar for Ben Affleck or the movie in general. Personally, I believe it is one of the better movies I have seen this year, and I believe it deserves numerous nominations, not just for Pike, but also for Affleck, Carey, writer Gillian Flynn, and David Venture. Regardless of whether it receives numerous Academy Award nominations or not, I look forward to the day when it is finally released on DVD. It is that good. Anthony Lania of Fath New Yorker wrote, "At first blush, a gondola is natural Fencherland. So why doesn't the movie Claw also The Social Network did? Who could have predicted that a film about murder, betrayal, and deception would be less exciting than a film about the website?" Aslant Magazine's Ed Gonzalez awarded the film 2 out of 4 stars, concluding, "Finer and Flynn should have gone further and truly grappled with the real horror that by giving his relationship with Amy another chance, Nick is indulging in one of the great myths of feminism that it emasculates men. Rather than undermine that noxiousness, Venture enshrouds it in furial brushstrokes that cast Hisela as a fashionable tumbling into an abyss of willful denial." In response to some of the criticisms of the film, Flynn said, "The whole point is that these are two people pretending to be other people, better people, versions of the dream guy and dream girl, but each one couldn't keep it up, so they destroy each other." In 2025, it ranked number 64 in all the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century and number 79 on the Reader Choice edition of the list. Accolades Gone Gorilla garnered awards and nominations in a variety of categories with praise for its direction, Pike's performance, Flynn's screenplay, and its soundtrack. At the 87th Academy Awards, Pike received a nomination for a Best Actress. The film received 4 nominations at the 72nd Golden Globe Awards, a Best Director for Fincher, a Best Actress in a Drama for Pike, a Best Screenplay for Flint, and a Best Original Score. Pike received a nomination for Best Actress at the 68th British Academy Film Awards, BAFTA. The International Board of Reviews included the film in their list of top 10 films of the year, and the soundtrack was nominated for the 2015 Grammy Award for Best Score Soundtrack for visual media themes. In a 2013 interview with a Time Out magazine writer, Novid Parshi, who described the ending of the novel as polarizing, Flynn explained that she wanted the novel to counter the notion that women are naturally good and to show that women are just as violently minded as men are. In a November 2014 interview, Flynn admitted that the critical gender-related response did affect her. "I had about 24 hours where I hovered under my covers and was like, I killed feminism. Why did I do that, rats? I did not mean to do that. And then I very quickly kind of felt comfortable with what I had written." In an October 3rd, 2014 blog post for Miss Magazine, Natalie Wilson argues that by not addressing a Miss Social privilege, yet which affords her the necessary funds, skills, know-how, and spare time to stage, a disappearance is the crystallization of 1,000 misogynist myths and fears about female behavior. Alyssa Rosenberg wrote Tina the Washington Post on October 3rd, 2014 that although she was initially unconvinced by the book, her fascination with the novel and film was partly due to her conclusion that Amy Elliott is the only fictional character I can think of who might be accurately described as simultaneously a misogynist and a misandress. In an October 6, 2014 article titled Gone, Girl's Biggest Villain is Marriage Itself, a Jazia Bell's Jessica Cohen wrote, "Move Amy pales in comparison to the vivid character we meet in the book. Strip away book Amy's complexities, and you're left with little more than crazy. That makes her no less captivating, but it does make the film feel a lot more misogynistic than the novel." Take Cohen concedes that this did not negate her enjoyment of the film, as we ladies are well accustomed to these injustices. Times a Doctor wrote on the same date that a Gangjula is both a sexist portrayal of crazy woman and a feminist manifesto, and that this duality makes the film interesting. Zoho Helarofa. The New York Review of Books wrote, "The problem with Amy is not that she acts in vicious and reprehensible ways, or even that her behavior lends credence to certain misogynisty fantasies. The problem is that she isn't really a character, but rather an animation of a not very interesting idea about the female capacity for nastiness, concluding that the film is a piece of silliness, not powerful enough in the end to engender proper disapproval, only wonder at its coarseness and perhaps mild dismay at its critical success." Writing in of The Guardiana on October 6, 2014, Joan Smith criticized what she saw as the film's recycling of fair rape myths, citing research released in 2013 which stated that false allegations of rape in the UK were extremely rare. Aishi wrote, "The characters live in a parallel universe where the immediate reaction to a woman who says she's been assaulted is one of chivalrous concern. Tell that to all the victims here and in the US who have had their claims dismissed by skeptical police officers." Dada, writing for The Guardiana on the following day, and Sena, wrote that Smith's argument wouldn't carry as much weight where this film set against a vastly wider range of women's stories and characters in mainstream culture, but concluded with Dr. Aman's plea for the portrayal of all sorts of women in our novels. Tim Crowenert of the Australian website Eureka Street wrote on October 8, 2014 that the film's predominant focus upon Nick's perspective serves to obfuscate Amy's motives, though it is possible that she is simply a sociopath and to amplify her personification of anti-woman myths. However, Crowenert concludes that Angula is a compelling rumination on the impossibility of knowing the mind of another, even within that tensibly most intimate of relationships, marriage, potential sequel. In an interview in October 2014, Rosamund Pike stated she would return for a sequel if Gillian Flynn wrote the script. In January 2015, Flynn said she was open to the idea of a sequel, but said it would be a few years down the road when the original cast and crew would be available again. Real-world kidnapping for several months. The police and the media labeled the real-world kidnapping of Denise Huskins in March 2015 as the Gang Girl hoax, because they erroneously thought it followed a similar pattern as the movie. In fact, Haskins was the victim of an actual kidnapping and not the perpetrator of a hoax. The case was the subject of a documentary, A American Nightmare. If you are looking for the next great date movie, you have come to the wrong review. If there is one thing that David Fincher's Gone Girl is not, it is a date movie. This is without a doubt one of the most frightening films I've ever seen, and not in a tongue-in-cheek Scream AK way. This is a truly psychologically terrifying film. It is also an involving and mesmerizing thriller that ranks among the year's best films. It is likely that you are familiar with the story of Gone Girl, or at least with the novel upon which it was based. Gillian Flynn's dark, twisty tale of a marriage gone wrong became a worldwide bestseller not long after it was released in June 2012. Gone Girl is the story of Nick and Amy Dunn, a seemingly idyllic married couple on the brink of their 5th anniversary, when Amy Rosamund Pike suddenly goes missing on the morning of that celebration. However, Nick Ben Affleck comes under scrutiny from the police. Soon, detectives Boney, Kim Dickens, and Gilpin, welcome back from the dead, Patrick Fugit, begin to suspect that Nick knows more about the disappearance than he is letting on. And the truth about Nick and Amy's marriage begins to unravel a broken bar. Or does it? One of the best things about Gone Girl is the way that it messes with your head without being manipulative. It pretty much goes without saying that no one in this film can be trusted, and that what you see is not necessarily what you get. That is about all I can say without spoiling anything. But when Gone Girl pulls the rug out from under you, you will be grinning rather than groaning. I will admit that I did not enjoy the novel as much as many others did. I found the characters cold to the touch. and extremely hard to engage with. Even though the characters in Gone Girl are deliberately unlikable, there still needs to be some reason for the reader to care about what happens to them, and I do not think I fully got that with the novel. With the film, however, I was hooked from the word go. It all starts with the actors. Ben Affleck has never been better. This is a perfect role for him, because it allows him to see just how far his everyman charm can take him with the sleazy character. Even as the evidence against Nick builds, we search for some other explanation, and that is a huge credit to Affleck's performance. Rosamund Pike is equally impressive as Amy. Her performance is something of a high-wire, tight trope act for reasons I will not disclose, but I will say that, essentially, she has to give two performances for one character and that she nails them both. Her facial expressions too often tell us much more than her words. The supporting cast acquits itself very well. Also Neil. Patrick Harris is great in a showy part as one of Amy's ex-boyfriends, and so, surprisingly enough, is Tyler Perry as Nick's flashy New York defense attorney. They really bring a vitality to their characters that I did not get with the novel. I am not sure if Gone Girl is necessarily that rare example of a movie that is better than its book. Rather, this story is much better suited to film than to literature, and that David Fincher is certainly the man to tell the story before he became notable for. Serious dramas like The Social Network and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button finance for himself with gritty, psychological thrillers like, say, 7N, Fight Club, and Panic Room. As always, he has a deft touch, and he knows how to stage each scene to achieve maximum suspense. Indeed, Gone Girl has suspense in spades. Much like last year's superior thriller Prisoners, Gone Girl holds the audience in a virtual vice. Grip slowly building up the anticipation before channeling it into one wickedly grotesque scene of climactic violence that has audiences shivering and laughing at the same time. What is truly terrifying about the film, however, is the relevance and modernity of Flynn's screenplay. Even amidst the grandiosity of the film's plot, the screenplay retains an unsettling air of believability, especially when it comes to the media circus surrounding Amy's disappearance and the way Nick is presented to the public. Ultimately, Gone Girl is one of the must-see films of the year. You may not want to see it again for a long time after it is over, but while you are watching it, I doubt you will want to be anywhere else. Gone Girl is art and entertainment, a thriller in an issue, and a nearly assured audience picture. It is also a film that shifts emphasis and perspective so many times that you may feel as though you're watching 5 short movies strung together, each morphing into the next. At first, Gone Girl seems to tell the story of a man who might or might not have killed somebody and is so closed off and alienating like Bruno Richard Heichmann perhaps that even people who believe in his innocence can't help wondering. His name is Nick Dunn Ben Affleck. He's a college professor and a block writer. His dissatisfied wife, Amy Rosamund Pike, disappears one day, prompting local cops to open a missing persons case that becomes a murder investigation after 3 days passed without word from her. Amy and Nick seemed like a happy couple. The snippets from Amy's diary read in voice, over by Amy and accompanied by flashbacks hint at differences between them, but not the sort that seem irreconcilable. Not at first, anyway. Were things ever really all that sunny? Though, if they weren't, which spouse was the main source of rancor? Can we trust what Nick tells the homicide? Detectives Kim DeKenza and Patrick Fugit, both outstanding. Who investigate Amy's case? Can we trust what Amy tells us via her diary? Is one of the spouses lying? Are they both lying? If so, to what end? The film raises these questions and others, and it answers nearly all of them, often in boldface all. Cap sentences that end with exclamation points. It is not a subtle film, nor is it trying to be as directed by a David Fincher, say 7N Zodiac, and as adapted by a Gillian Flynn from her best-selling potboiler Gone Girl, suggests one of those overheated, fairly comic bookish, R-rated thrillers that were everywhere in the late 80s and early 90s like those sorts of pictures. Gone Girl is dependent upon reversals of expectation and point of view. As soon as you get a handle on what it is, it becomes something else. Then something else again. Describing its storyline in detail would ruin aspects that would be counted as selling. Points for anyone who hasn't read Flynn's book. That's why I'm being so vague. It suffice to say that it's explicit sex and violence, and one damn thing after another to hell with realism. Plotting put it in the Basic Instinct. Fatal Attraction, presumed innocent wheelhouse. It is a meta-fictionally minded version of a Bloody Domestic. Melodrama that actually uses the word meta. In a scene where Nick and the cops discuss his bar A, which is named the bar. It ties much of its mystery plot to an anniversary scavenger hunt with clues, and closed and numbered envelopes mark clue. Key scenes revolve around public statements that are in some sense performances and that are evaluated by onlookers in terms of their believability. And yet it never crosses the line and becomes too much a deconstruction or parody. It's a plot. Obsessed picture that's determined to stay one step ahead of faithy audience at all times and cheats when it feels it. Has to. It is a perfect example of a subgenre that the great critic and Bilson has labeled a preposterous thriller in which characters and their behavior bear no relation, not just to life as we know it, but to any sort of properly structured fiction we may have hitherto encountered. Many classic and near-classic films can be slotted into this subgenre. One of them is Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, a film in which the bad guy scheme makes no sense if you think about it for longer than 30 seconds. And that, in any event, would have unraveled had even the smallest part of it not gone precisely as envisioned. How did Gavin and Impastor Maddie get out of the bell tower anyway, without being seen by anybody, including Scotty? Was there a second stairwell? After A Gone Girl, I overheard a couple listing all the dropped plot threads and the narrative holes big enough to hide aircraft carriers in. This isn't the sort of movie that can withstand that kind of scrutiny. You might as well say that part in My Dream where the penguin told me where to dig for the treasure seemed unrealistic. What if Gone Girl is a parable of gender relations, one that eventually takes an ugly misogynist turn? I've heard thus he charges so leveled and they have merit. You'll understand what I mean once you've seen the movie. At the same time, though, as we evaluate those complaints, we owe it to Flynn Finur and everyone involved to take into account what sort of film this is, what mode it's operating in, and how transparent it is about what it's doing, how it's doing it, and why. Gone Girl is a nightmare of love gone cold in. The relationship gone south, coupled with an elaborate revenge fantasy that both exploits and reclaims sexist images and assumptions. It's also a film about the psychopath who turns an ordinary life into chaos. Like a lot of Hitchcock and like certain domestic nightmares by such filmmakers as Brian De Palma and Luis Buñuel. Each scene in the movie refers, however, bleakly to real fears, real emotions, and real configurations of love or friendship. But at the same time, not a single frame is meant to be taken literally as a documentary-like account of how people are or shouldn't be. It's working through primordial feelings in the manner of a blues song, a pulp thriller, a film noir, or a horror picture. Dots modes all trade in stereotypical views of the essences of masculinity and femininity. All are politically incorrect by definition. All seem to have had at least some bearing on Gone Girl. A Thea movie is sick joke, a fable and a lament. It's he done her wrong and she done him wrong. Its men are spineless pigs and hell hath no fury. Like a woman scorned. If you make blanket assumptions about what men and women are capable of, and the circumstance cessa under what they're capable of, this film will confirm them. Your chin, Amy tells Nick in a flashback. It's quite villainous. He covers it up with his finger, but now that she's pointed it out, you can't notice stare at it, and the most intriguing thing about Gone Girl is how droll it is for long stretches furs. Gliding by the screen camera work, immaculate compositions, and sickly the saturated colors fuse with the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's creepy, optimistic synthesized score to create a perverse big-screen aversion of one of those TV comedies built around a pathetically unobservant lump of a husband and a hyper-controlling slightly shrewish wife for most of its running time. Gone Girl Issa. Everybody loves accused wife murderer Raymond sprinkled with colorful virgin on wacky supporting players, including a Tyler Perry as a Johnny Cochran-like defense attorney and a Neil Patrick Harissa as a former flame of Amy's who's still obsessed with her. Then it takes a right turn and a left turn and flips upside down. I'm not saying the film is genuinely clever throughout, though it is always fishly manipulative or that every twist is defensively. A few are stupid. I'm saying that Gone Girl is what it is, that Titan knows of what it is, and that it works. You know how well it's working. When you hear how audiences laugh at it, and with it, their laughter evolves as the film does. They laugh tentatively at first, then with an enthusiasm that gives way to a full-throated IA endorse this madness gusto during the final half hour when the story spirals into the Palma-style expressionism, and the picture becomes a maelstrom of blood, tears, and other bodily fluids. There are allusions to the O.J. Simpson case, Macbeth, and media, and the ending is less an ending than a punchline that's all the more amusing for feeling so deflated. that it's harder to tell whether Fincher has Anna opinion on anything he's showing us or is just sadistically abused like an evil. Child tormenting insects somehow adds to the movie's dark vibrancy. This director is a misanthrope, no question, but misanthropes can be entertaining, and Gone Girl is that. And not just in the scenes where women see through men and other women with furious contempt, but in throwaway moments such as when an unseen man yells louder at the bell-eared Nick during a pressy conference and when the film shows tourists gathered in front of Nick's bar taking a selfies. Thea is a sick film, and often brilliant. But Amy's behavior is shown to be increasingly concerning as we talk to her ex-boyfriend, now a registered rapist because she falsely accused him. Then we see the guy who straight up has war-ripped her for 20 years. Amy is very unhinged to the point where she inserts herself with Nick's semen to get pregnant. That's an entirely new level of messed up after almost framing him for murder and then forcing him to stay with you. It's fascinating to observe this as a contrast to the perfect Amy that her parents had created. It makes me wonder if she got this way as a form of extreme rebellion against this perfect image created, that once someone else goes outside of the perfect world she's trying to create, she lashes out in extremely violent and manipulative ways. But it's almost as if she's a character too that's being written and rewritten. She's a writer. That's for sure confirmed in this. And it makes me think that she views her life as something she can simply change on a psychic whim without any regard to another's pain. This is just a fascinating film to pick apart. You're either Team Amy or Team Nick, but the plot sets you up to be either team because of how it unfolds. Originally, you're Team Amy, but as you learn more and more about what's actually going on, you may defect to the other team. It's also an interesting look at gender in American society, especially when you break apart the cool girl monologue. She says she's not going to do all of this for a man that isn't worth it. Damn. But at the end of the day, she ends up killing someone from her past in order to get back with him. She literally contradicts the big monologue in this movie, which is the biggest irony of it all. It shows you how this American dream and happy family created by it is an absolutely farce, a construct that goes away once eyes and cameras look away. It's been a while since anything really interesting and review-worthy has released. Or it might be due to the fact that I've since moved to Connecticut and started law school. As a fan of Gillian Flynn's psychologically turbulent thriller, I knew Gone Girl would be a must-see a broken bar. And who better to direct than David Fincher, the grandmaster of contemporary noir cinema. At first blush, Gone Girl is the story of struggling writer Nick Dunn, Ben Affleck, whose wife Amy Rose Pike abruptly disappears on the morning of their 5th anniversary. Raised as a child of Privilege A and as the inspiration for Amazing Amy, a series of children's books written by her parents, say Amy has clearly grown apart from her husband, numbed by their drab suburban existence. At least that's how it is in Nick's telling without revealing too much. The film unfolds in non-linear fashion, deploying unreliable narrator twists along the way. What emerges is a tangled web of half-truth, infidelity, alienation, and betrayal. A1 which rips away the veneer of contemporary civility to expose a viciously night-scene tension between husband and wife. Finer has clearly brought his agame to this project. And it would be hard to imagine a better synthesis of director and subject matter backed by a buzzing, insidiously ambient electronic score. Composed by longtime Fincher collaborators Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Fincher conjures up a manistrenched masterpiece. The sense of impending doom that suffuses his entire filmography is certainly present here at once both repellent and hypnotic. Additionally, Affleck and Pike are perfect in their parts, or 8. One couldn't ask for a better Nick Amy. And perhaps most impressively of all, the black comedy of the original novel isn't lost in the translation to screen. Gone Girl isn't totally downbeat. Despite its gothic subject matter at its misshapen heart, Gone Girl is a stark indictment of humans' desire to remake one another, to suit their idealized fantasies. Some commentators have treated it as an indictment of marriage itself, but this is too narrow a view. Marriage is but one of the spheres which these broken protagonists decide to weaponize. Tensions between family and career, wealth and fulfillment, and masculine and feminine expectations are all factors bearing on the tragedy that unfolds on screen. And what a tragedy it is, a baroque in the best of ways kept from melodrama by the steady hand of its director and cast. Gone Girl is a dark, brutal, emotionally twisted drama that's obviously not for all audiences. There's sexual content and a memorably grisly scene of violence. It's also a wrenching study of social power dynamics and a brilliantly crafted piece of neo-noir that raises questions of identity, projection, and manipulation. The story begins when protagonist Nick McDonough Affleck receives a call from a nosy neighbor whilst at work, alerting him to the fact that his front door is wide open and his cat is sat outside the house. Nick returns home to find his wife Amy Pike gone and glass tables overturned. It's Nick and Amy's 5th wedding anniversary, and something is amiss. The police are called and an investigation follows. This investigation soon becomes America's biggest news story as the media discovers that Amy, a beautiful New Yorker and the inspiration for America's favorite children's books, Amazing Amy, is presumed to have been murdered by her cool and calm husband, Nick. These two phrases are repeated again and again by Nick as he becomes the primary suspect in the investigation into his wife's disappearance. As time goes on, you begin to hate Nick more and more as it becomes glaringly obvious that he has been lying to the police and is withholding information. True to the book, this film is told from the alternating perspective of Nick and Amy. Nick's narrative is told in the present, whilst Amy's gives us a glimpse into how the relationships between Nick and herself has developed over the course of their marriage. It is from Amy's narration that you begin to see the cracks in Nick's story. Or is it the other way around? Is Nick lying or is Amma lying? Maybe they're both lying. Good luck trying to wrap your head around this one. Keep this in mind when you think, oh, on Girl, because I guarantee that you will not be able to predict the outcome of this film. Around halfway through this film, a huge plot twist is revealed that changes everything. Prior to this game changer, you're probably thinking that you've got it all sessed and wondering how they could possibly drag out the outcome of the story for another 1 to 2 hours. Perhaps if you're a thriller fanatic, you're still not quite convinced that all is as it seems. But either way, you won't be prepared for just how dark and disturbing this film gets. When you think that this story has reached its peak, it just gets darker and darker and darker to the point where you begin to seriously question the mental stability of the scriptwriter and author Gillian Flynn. How could someone write a tally? If these are disturbing, possibly the most disturbing thing, however, is that this film ends with a cliffhanger at the story is not over, and I dread to think where Fincher and Flynn will take us next. Ganga combines a darkly chilling tale that cleverly analyzes some of the big questions of our time, including gender stereotypes, marriage, even the obsession with celebrity with the near-perfect cast and script, all of which is delivered under Fincher's brilliant direction. Rosamund Pike's performance as Amy will stay with you long after you have left the cinema. Screen in what is probably one of the most mesmerizing performances of the year, which places her as a serious contender for a Best Actress at next year's Oscars. Egon Jarilla also stands in good stead to be nominated for numerous other awards: Best Score, Best Editing, Best Director, and Best Picture, just to name a few. But with a few months to go, we'll just have to wait and see. Impeccably crafted, this is not one to miss. David Fincher's Gone Girl opens with a wordly framed close-up of Amy Dunn's Rosamund Pike head while her husband Nick Ben Affleck muses on the often unspoken thoughts that might course through any marriage. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other? The complex psychology and shifting dynamics of long-term relationships are just two of the engines driving Fincher's adaptation of Gillian Flynn's 2012 Battle of the Sexes book. To others include the pernicious voyeurism of the media, the way we curate and present our personalities in the modern era, and just how will Ben Affleck fit into that buttsuit with that belly. The net result is, especially in its first two-thirds, a cinematic equivalent of a juicy page-turner, a gripping, sharp, blissfully entertaining thriller that pushes every hot topic button you can think of to become the must-to-talk-about film of the year. It's not hard to see why Finch was attracted to Gone Girl. It touches base with much of his previous work. Panic Room, a key location, is decked out to the rafters with surveillance equipment. Zodiac, the sense of a procedural in the information age, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a particularly violent bedroom encounter, are all touchstones. But more pertinently, there is a briskness and a malicious glee in telling a tale that harks back to Seven in the Game. There's no head-in-the-box moment, just the buzz of a director, delighting and leading you into some dark, dark recesses. Flynn's book shifts between first-person narratives told from Nick the present and Amy's the past. Perspectives in Fincher's film respects. The structure after a montage located at squarely made the mansions and mailboxes of all of America. Fincher gives us quickly sketched glimpses into Nick's life. A small talk with his sister, the excellent Carrie playing board games in his bar before his world is turned upside down with his wife. Missing a smash table and no apparent bloodbath. The investigation is led by the Marge Gunderson, Escaboni, Kim Dickens, and skeptical sidekick Jim Gilpin, Patrick Fugit. You'd expect Fincher to be good at detective stuff. He gives the cop pairing enough. Character not to feel rote, but not enough to slow things down. But he also excels at creating the hoop around. The CSI, the press conferences, the TV talk show debates, the community search, a candlelit vigil, the blurred line between culprit and celebrity. If Nick's Tale feels like Heartland for the director, the Amy side gives us a glimpse into what a David Fincher rom-com might feel like. As we meet them, the pair are at a party. People watching joking about Queen OA ignorance. He thinks it's a fish and mispronouncing the lyrics to New York. New York, she sings these Bagone shoes before kissing in a sugar storm created by a backstreet bakery, early doors. Pike perfectly becomes the embodiment of Flynn's notion of the cool girl lay a hot, brilliant, funny woman who adores football, poker, dirty jokes, and burping. Ayan finds other colors too. We're so cute, I could punch us in face, Amy tells Nick as they open Fortune, cookies and swap matching anniversary presents. But this is Fincher. You can't imagine Adam Sandler chowing down on Drew Barrymore for Conalinga, and it is not long before fissures start to appear. A recession. 2 job losses in the prenup are just the start. Only in a venture film would a protagonist buy a gun for Valentine's Day. The first act is smartly sketched, a nice balance of character stuff and intriguing setup. But moving into the middle section, Fincher and Flynn ratchet things up to a whole new level of compelling. As the truth about Amy's disappearance emerges, Fincher turns the screws on Nick, rattling the skeletons in his closet. There are red herrings and red panties, ascending him further down the river, until he lawyers up with Tannerbolt, the patron saint of wife killers. Tyler Perry gives a nice comic energy without diluting the drama. Affleck nimbly treads a tight trope between innocent, affable, man-accused and disillusioned husband who could happily strangle his wife. The grand design works because it finds a center in its star. In the end, Gone Girl is a film about image and perception. On the broader level, it's about how the media builds fabulations that quickly get subsumed as truth and the fickleness of the public that will swallow whatever narrative is being sold. On a more intimate level, it is about the fatal dissection aids we build, the masks we wear, the impossibility of knowing those closest to us, not to mention the depiction of marriage as a bleak prison is a prevalent theme in art house cinema. Here we get it at the center of a upper mainstream white-knuckle crowd pleaser. Just as the emotions are stripped back and raw, so Fincher's work is equally unchy. The fanboys may pine for the coffee pot shot prie of Panic Room or the speeded-up roaring race set piece of The Social Network, but this is the director working without flash and thunder. Confident his narrative has more than enough. Still working with regular DP Jeff Cronworth, he pulls out subtly arresting images, say Amy floating on a low in a swimming pool that speak less to flair and more to style. Gone Girl's filmmaking ammo is cold, controlled, and clinical. It doesn't have a hair out of place. Yet a couple of things don't quite come off. When the film comes to resolve itself, its solutions don't satisfy the third act powering down rather than ramping up. Also, Fincher doesn't quite nail the tone in the home stretch. In its latter stages, he tries to more overtly syringe satire into the grimness, especially around Neil Patrick Harris sex, does he? And it doesn't quite land, but its scalpel-like dissection of the mindset of marriage still holds sway. If love is a battlefield, Fincher's film is a dispatch from the white-hot heat of carnage. For those in a relationship, you may recognize its petty hatreds, artful manipulations, and quiet despair. For those who are not, it will make you thankful to be single. The less you know about the Gongilla before seeing it, the better, so you won't find any spoilers. Here, except for this one. Spend $10 to go see a Gongula in the theater, and it'll be worth every penny. After all, movies are supposed to entertain us. That's the reason we're still willing to invest a couple hours in a single activity, put our short attention spans on hold and fork over $13 for a soda and popcorn. Gondola is dark and a bit twisted, but it's also sprinkled with humor to break some of the tension. It feels all too real at times, which certainly is a reflection of our society's obsession with high-profile crimes. The cast is electrifying, and the film sucks you into such a degree that you lose track of the nearly 2.5-hour runtime. Above all, it's compelling, and wildly entertaining. If you're one of the people who have already read the book, you know the kind of roller coaster ride that awaits. I hadn't read it, so I was surprised by all the developments, and I didn't mind it one bit without giving too much away. A Gangala is about a Midwestern housewife who suddenly disappears on her 5th anniversary. All signs point to her husband, who gets the Nancy Grace treatment and endures a harsh media spotlight while everyone picks apart his behavior. Did he kill her? His behavior certainly seems suspicious, or was she abducted? Was it something else? A what happened to her? Ben Affleck is terrific as the husband, and it probably ranks as one of his best performances. Rosamund Pike, who I wasn't familiar with before this, is perfect in her role as the wife. And the lawyer played by Tyler Perry will make you forget all about media. Neil Patrick Harris is also creepily good, but the real stars are the crisp writing of former Entertainment Weekly. TV critic Gillian Flynn adapted her own new best-selling a novel lay in the direction of David Fincher, whose ominous foreboding style works perfectly for this story. While I love The Gondola and highly recommend it, I don't think it will be in line for any of the major category Oscars. It's not really a Best Picture type film, nor are the actors gonna get all that much buzz. It reminds me of Fincher's A Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which didn't get a Best Picture nom in 2012. The main sentiment to be taken away from Fincher's latest outing Gone Girl is that marriage is hard work. Our protagonist is bar owner, community college teacher Nick Dunn, who on the outside is happily married to amazing Amy Dunn. On the inside, there's bickering and abuse, all culminating in her disappearance on the day of their 5th wedding anniversary. For a while, the film starts to take an unreliable narrator approach. We watch as Nick is put through a Scott Peterson-like trial by fire with the glaring eyes of his numbers, his twin sister, and the media. As more and more information gets out, a secret affair with the student, mysterious credit card charges, damning words from Amy's diary, the more we start to question if Nick is telling the truth or not, and the more we wonder about whether or not we want him to get out of this scot-free. We learn of the story of the Dunn's marriage through narrated diary entries which start with their meet-cute at a party and work their way from fairy tale honeymoon. Phase 2, we've lost our money and jobs, but we've still got each other. Phase 2, emotionally manipulative, constant fighting phase. The flashback scenes are the only scenes in the film where Fincher doesn't shoot it like a horror film. In fact, some of the early scenes set in New York, like the flashback to their first kiss, have a certain magical lighting to them to contrast the stark grimness of the rest of the film. The film looks very Fincher, to say the least. He has a way of setting the tone of his film so that every small movement by a character seems sinister. This is readily evident with Desi Collins, an old boyfriend of Amy's that Nick has some questions for, played to creepy perfection by Neil Patrick Harris. The words his character says imply that he has no bad intentions. But under Fincher's direction, every subtle movement that he makes gives you the feeling that he's about to do something awful. What surprised me the most is how darkly funny it is. Gillian Flynn's script mines some pretty big laughs from some pretty dark places. On the surface, it's a satire on the media. A Nancy Grace stand-in frequently pops up on television giving wild speculations about Nick killing his wife, such as he's a sociopath and he and his sister are unusually close, which draws big laughs. And Tyler Perry comes out of nowhere to deliver a fantastic performance as a wife-killer lawyer who revitalizes Next image with the public. Underneath the surface, it's a statement about marriage and how two people can assume familiar roles to manipulate and hurt each other. If you're thinking about seeing this with a date, don't. The two of you will not leave the theater in a romantic mood. In predictable Fincher fashion, there are a number of twists and turns in the story that may leave you confused for a second. Towards the end, I kept thinking it was going to fade to black, and then right there. But then it kept on going. So there are a few fake-out endings. I'm glad it didn't end where I thought it did, because the final moment is a doozy and will no doubt be controversial. The last time David Fincher took a stab at a best-selling potboiler with an enigmatic fan fatal. The disappointing result was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, an eye-catchingly stylish but thematically empty and frankly unnecessary English-language remake of an entirely serviceable Danish-Swedish hit. Now with this grippingly caustic adaptation of Gillian Flynn's bifurcated novel, which the author has brilliantly adapted and reconfigured for the screen, Fincher is Back on form, mixing the forensic procedure of Fazodaka with the playful high-gloss Shinophathogamia to ingeniously wrongfoot the audience, leading them on a merry dance of death through the murderous maze of modern marriage. On the day of his 5th wedding anniversary, bar owner Nick Dunn Ben Affleck finds his Missouri home theatrically violated, the front door open, a glass table overturned, and smashed his wife Amy Rosamund Pike, unaccountably missing. Arriving at the scene, Detective Ron Taboni Kim Dickens. With a touch o' Fargo's Marge Gunderson senses that all is not as it seems, evidence of financial troubles, and domestic disputes turns the finger of suspicion toward Nick, whose uncertain displays of grief are deemed insufficient in an age of social media and rolling news. Within days, the realignment of Nick's smiling sociopath public image becomes more pressing than the search for his gone girl wife, whose own voice is heard through the pages of an incriminating diary, which reveals an alternative reading of their apparently idyllic marriage, partitive murder mystery, part cynically sexy social satire. A Gone opens with Nick, wondering, "What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other?" And then spends most of its lengthy running time gleefully refusing to answer any of those questions. Just the Gamia found Sean Penn setting elaborate role-playing traps for Michael Douglas. So the main characters here all adopt and discard projected persona, their true selves hidden beneath layers of unraveling deceit. Everything is a performance, everyone pretending to be something they are not, editing and rewriting themselves for the public and for one another. Tellingly, Amy is already a quasi-fictional character, immortalized and perversely idealized in her mother's best-selling Amazing Amy children's books, a fairy tale alter ego that still stalks its host in adulthood. Amy's diaries tell another story in which our reliable narrator is increasingly terrorized by Nick, whom she no longer recognizes as the man she married. Meanwhile, Nick takes peer lessons from attorney Tanner Bolt, Tyler Perry, the patron saint of wife killers, who understands the fine art of faking sincerity for the media. With its unhappily shared photos and incriminatory TV smiles, A Ganga could be interpreted as a wryly morbid companion piece to The Social Network, a homicide investigation without the body played out in an arena in which technology has blurred the divide between the public and the private, as Nick and Amy Affleck and Pick are very smartly cast their differing styles and stances, perfectly complementing the jagged mismatch of their marriage. While Affleck laces his likable joystick with the sly sense of concealment, Pike grapples with the more complex task of presenting a woman who exists in absentia, a prism-like refraction of the lives of others. There's something of Deborah Kara Anger's glacial aloofness in David Cronenberg's A Crash About Pike's electrifying performance, a sense of hollowness that ensures she remains truly gone even when center stage. She also gets the movie's best lines. "We're so cute. I want to punch us in the face," she tells Nick. In one typically dry romantic moment later, she recounts a withering catalog of soul-destroying whaley duties, including drinking beer while watching Adam Sandler movies. No wonder she goes Valentine's Day shopping for a gun. Although Hitchcock and Henry George's Claws ought to have been cited as stylistic predecessors, the real eminent cries lurking in the background here is Paul Verhoeven, or perhaps more accurately, writer Joe Superfeed of the 80s-90s erotic thriller genre. The opening movement of Fagen Girl, with its sympathetic FA apparently framed for a horrendous crime that he Maya have actually committed, is a setup that Esther Hose reworked time and time again, often to repetitive ends. Meanwhile, the third act is purely a basic instinct. It's she-devil philosophy and orgasmic splashes of blood, dearly replicating the cool fancy of Verhoeven's zero influence to Americana, more so than Adrian Lena, as A Fatal Attraction, to which Fincher has acknowledged a distant death, A Gondola, is umbilically tied to Esterhaus and Verhoeven's disreputable blockbuster A. Although some may balk at such a tottery comparison, shooting in handsome 6K digital wider screen cinematographer, Jeff Cronmouth keeps the visual tone cool and detached even as events heat up, is chewing the ticks and flashes of your "this is a picture-perfect world" presented with the untouched clarity of crime scene, fine-tuned and framed by Fincher, whose obsessive attention to detail mirrors that of his titular muse. At 149 minutes, the film never drags, nor does its mood settle, slipping from classy narcissistic humor to exploitation-inflicted thrills in an instant, mercurial, mystifying tantalizingly missing. Directed by David Fincher and based on the novel of the same name by Gillian Flynn, Gone Girl, tells the story of Nick and Amy Donna, who from the outside appear to have the perfect marriage. However, when Na mysteriously disappears on the day of their 5th wedding anniversary, Nick soon comes under suspicion of foul play when evidence begins to point his way and the secrets he tried to keep hidden are exposed. As Nick seems to morph from a loving husband to a monster before our very eyes, we are forced to ask ourselves, was Nick Don actually involved in Amy's disappearance? As the credits rolled on Gone Girl, I couldn't help but feel a little bit dissatisfied in the sense that I anticipated Gone Girl to be a film which would leave an impact, and I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about how great it was, and how good was that twist though? Alas, that was not the case. By no means was Gone Girl a bad film, but I wouldn't quite say it was an outstanding one either. Its main problem was pacing. Everything felt so dragged out and lagging for the first hour and a half, and then all of a sudden everything was happening for me. The story seemed to become hard to keep up with towards the end as Amy's story became more complicated. Furthermore, the film seemed to just a broken bar end and it was incredibly vague. Are we supposed to assume they do stay together? What about the baby? I suppose I can understand the symbolism in ending it in such a way, there's no happy ending for them, or it symbolizes their current lives, metaphorically ending from that point as they start new and fake lives together. For the media. But it also seems like a bit of a cop-out to leave so many unanswered questions. But this is a David Fincher film after all, and that's generally a trend in his films. Speaking of which, one thing that really struck me about Gone Girl was just how well David Fincher managed to make it into a typical David Fincher film. Considering it's not an original screenplay, similarly to his direction in Fight Club, Fincher manages to manipulate the audience by withholding information until certain points in the film. We are made to favor first Nick and then Amy and then neither of them, simply because Fincher only feeds us little parts of the big picture at a time without us even realizing it. This makes me see the film in 3 parts. Part 1A, where we like Nick, Part 2, where we like Amy, and Part 3A, where we hate them both. In a part no, we are given enough information from both the current events and narration from Amy's diary to like Nick, as he appears to be a loving and devoted husband who is in shock over the disappearance of his wife. A part 1 then swiftly comes to an end once we find out that Nick has been playing his wife and us all along by having an affair information which was withheld from us. A part 2 begins from this point, and when Amy shares all the details of how she managed to fake her murder because of how badly Nick treated her, our favor for her is cemented. Part 3 doesn't begin until we find out a further crucial information which was withheld from us. Amy's sociopathic behavior. At this point, we realize both Nick and Amy are problematic, and we are prevented from siding with either of Amos, because they're as bad as each other. That might be a slight exaggeration, and seeing as Amy murdered someone and Nick didn't. But you get the idea. I compared this to Fight Club because Fight Club, spoilers coming up there. The bigger picture is also hidden from us. We're manipulated into seeing things from the narrator's point of view without even realizing until Tyler is revealed to be a figment of his imagination. And then, similarly to a part 3 of Gurley, we see everything for what it really is. One last point of note that I can't bear to skip over is just how well-deserved Rosamund Pike's nominations were for her portrayal of Amy Dunn. By simply seeing the clips shown at the Golden Globe 'SB 'S Oscars of her performance, I knew it was bloody good. No pun intended, but you can't fully appreciate it until you see Gone Girl in full. She managed to manipulate and trick us in the same way Amy manipulated and tricked everyone around her. I will shamefully admit that at the time of writing this, which was more than 7 years after this film had come out, that the only thing I knew about this movie was the cool girl monologue by Rosamund Pike. I literally had no idea what this movie was about and had procrastinated on watching because of that monologue. It was a very good monologue. I'm not dissing on it at all, but the monologue when I knew nothing about the film made it seem like that this was about some blonde accepting what she is, which in a way is what this movie is about, but let's discuss that later. I have a big major gay crush on Rosamund Pike. It started when I watched I Care a Lot on Netflix a while back, which I wrote a review of too, and I was absolutely in love with her conwoman look. There was also major shock on my end when that movie suddenly turned into a lesbian romance, but you need to watch the movie to experience that in its full effect. And so I will also shamefully admit that I watched this movie just because of this gay crush on Pike, but I was pleasantly surprised. We see this story in every mode of storytelling, past, present, future. We begin in the present. day, but there's a lot of flashbacks to show us the momentum of Nick Dunn and Amy Dunn's relationship. They meet in New York City as two young writers. Amy is the daughter of wealthy writers who've created an entire book series on their daughter's failures. The book protagonist is everything Amy is not. Reading some resentment there. We see them having sex in libraries and having cute dates all over the city, setting it up to be some sort of whirlwind romance. But the present day is everything but romantic. Nick, now a writing teacher in Missouri, had them move out to the Midwest when his mother got sick and eventually died. Amy hated him for that fact because they had to leave their lives in New York City behind, despite them losing their jobs in the 2008 recession. The first seed of doubt about the relationship is planted during these kinds of flashbacks because Amy seems angry at how Nick just spends money on video games and computers. And this is the first hint to us that from the get-go, their relationship was kind of doomed. In Missouri, Nick is actually cheating on Amy with one of his students, something that she finds out after catching them having sex in their house. And so this is where fiction begins to blend with reality when Amy goes missing. The cops find a bunch of journals in which she claims that she was being hit by Nick and being abused, leading to fears that he was going to kill her. This then makes the cops think that Nick killed her, especially after blood was found splashed in the kitchen. The plot thickens here as we switch over to a very alive Amy after her cool girl monologue. She had dyed her hair and is living in a cabin next to a bunch of drunks, living with a stash of money. She's keeping hidden on her. It turns out that she's actually the mastermind behind all of this. She got Nick drunk and had him sign off on increasing her life insurance. She planted the fake diary entries in a place where the cops could find it, burning the journal in the process to make it seem like a botched attempt at getting rid of evidence. Buys useless things on Nick's credit card and burns the fake murder weapon in their fireplace. The media also plays a major role here as well. It creates this witch hunt against Nick and his innocent sister, pretty much ruining their lives if Amy didn't come back and made her obsessive ex seem like a rapist. But at the end of the day, Nick, his sister, the lead investigator, and Nick's attorney all are aware that Tammy is extremely out there and faked. All of this. A bit unbelievable that the FBI just let the investigation slide so easily. But I'll give the film the benefit of the doubt here. I do think the way the media plays an antagonistic role in this film is absolutely powerful and relevant in today's society. When a young pretty white woman goes missing, people go absolutely nuts to the point where innocent people are hurt by the fallout of another's twisted actions. While Amy has slightly corrected the wrong Flynn, the author of the novel version of the movie, has stated that she's feminist and that it's important to show that women can be villains too. And that's the important part of this movie. Amy is our villain. We're set up too to think that Nick is abusive in the beginning, even when he proclaims his innocence. We're suspicious of him until Amy makes her grand reappearance and tells us all about her evil plans. Was he a good husband? Probably not. This just seemed to have been a fling gone too far. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.